Welcome to From Guilt to Good, Self-Care Solutions for Busy Caregivers, the podcast rewriting the narrative of self-care. If you're a caregiver feeling stretched thin, torn between responsibilities, and longing for self-care, you are in the right place. I'm Jeanette Yates, a fellow caregiver and someone who spent years doing all the self-care things and never really feeling any better. After years of research, self-exploration, and trial and error, I finally found a way to create a sustainable self-care practice that made me feel good, not guilty. In From Guilt to Good, we'll explore how you can do that too. Together, we'll hear expert insights, actionable steps, and heartfelt stories to guide you toward rediscovering your worth, reclaiming your health, and getting back to the life that you've been too busy to enjoy. And today we are joined by Sondra Harper. I really enjoyed having this conversation with Sondra. She is an artist, yogi, and the author of The Four Attitudes, The Alchemy of an Open Heart and Calm Mind. Her passion for empowering women shines through in her teachings of Vishoka, a method fostering a state of sorrowless joy. Sondra's skillful use of meditation, metaphors, and attitude helps to unveil hidden depths of potential that are truly transformative. And I invited Sondra to have a conversation with us today to share her expertise on breath work, the specific type that she uses, or the specific practice she uses, which is that Vishoka that I mentioned in her intro. But she specifically uses breath work to foster the healing of guilt and burnout. And I was like, hello, that is us. So I wanted to have her on. But she's also going to share a little bit about her journey as a caregiver during a period of time where her mother was recovering from a car accident. And so she talks about that experience a little bit. So she's going to give us part personal story, part practical guide, and how to help us understand the importance of our breath and how using it can actually be transformative in our lives. And of course, you know, we talk about, she and I talk about how the breath is actually the one tool that we have with us all the time for our whole lives. We have our breath. And so I love how she talks about cultivating the use of it in a way that is helpful and something that we all have access to. So without further ado, let's welcome Sondra Harper. If you're an overwhelmed caregiver that longs for some of your life back, craves time for self-care, freedom from the isolation of caregiving and the guilt, then the Empowered Self-Caregiver cohort is for you. Within the Empowered Self-Caregiver cohort, we'll take a deeper look into your unique caregiving challenges, assess your current self-care practices, and explore a personalized plan where you feel your self-care focus is most necessary. You'll design a self-care practice that is flexible enough for your life and something that you're going to actually enjoy. Erase your guilt, embrace a sense of worthiness and empowerment, and create an unshakable support system to avoid a lonely caregiving journey. In the Empowered Self-Caregiver cohort, I share the very steps I took to break the burnout cycle of self-care. As someone who has been a caregiver for over 2 decades, I know what it's like and I know what it takes to finally find balance. And my care framework inside the cohort teaches you to find that balance too. If you're interested in learning more about the Self-Caregiver cohort, please go to theselfcaregiver.com or check the show description for details. All right, here we are with Sondra Harper. Sondra, welcome to the From Guilt to Good podcast. How are you doing today?
Great. How are you?
I am good. And, you know, I'm really excited to have you here. We're going to get into all of the breath work, meditation, all of those things. But I always like to start by asking my guests about your personal caregiving experience. So if you have any, we would love to hear a little bit of your caregiving journey. And so I'm going to let you take the mic and get started on that.
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, so in 2017, my mother was in a really severe car accident and she suffered a closed brain injury. And if any of your listeners know about closed brain injury, it's very serious. And she had 3 hematomas inside of her brain that were bleeding. She is living. My mom is living, thank God. But when she was going through that, she was in intensive care for 4 weeks, and then she was in private care for 2 months. So I went and helped my father take care of all of that and get her the help she needed. And then when she came home, I went and stayed. Um, so caregiving, that's my big experience is being there as my mother went through that journey of having a very severe brain injury.
Mm.
So yeah.
And what do you, well, first of all, I'm so glad that she has recovered and is recuperated. I know that, all kinds of injuries, illnesses, and, problems are devastating in their own way. But when something happens dramatically like that, sometimes we talk on the show about how, sometimes you get a little warning, you get a little heads up that caregiving is going to be something that's going to be on your plate. And then sometimes it just shows up in an accident, a diagnosis, a
Mm-hmm.
doctor blood work that comes back not good. It's just, and so all kinds of things. Do you remember do you feel like you were also doing some caregiving with your dad as well, like for him in that moment as well? I hear that a lot from people who are helping their parent caregive.
Absolutely. My mother always took care of my father. And then when she had the accident and couldn't take care of him, my sister and I both jumped in and helped him, be able to navigate things like house cleaning and groceries and, just things that he would do all the working and she would take care of the house the later years in
Right.
their life. And so, yes, that would help with my father's transition into that.
Yes. Yeah, that's one of the things that I talk about with caregivers a lot is the transition from daughter to caregiver, from wife to caregiver, to caregiver
Yeah.
for if it's your partner or something, and how that you have to navigate that transition, and it's so difficult. But it is always nice when you have a support system, which it sounds like that you did, and so that you were able to be a support and then have the support of your sister and of course your father as well. So let's dive into your self-care area of expertise. And I'm really excited about this because anybody who's listened to the podcast knows I'm all about some mindfulness because I really think it's so easy as caregivers. And you talk about, you've been a caregiver, you're also a mom. How easy is it for us to not be mindful going through our day? Like we get through the day where
Mm-hmm.
we don't even know how anything happened. It just did. And
They just feel
so,
gone.
yeah. And so coming up with a mindfulness practice, intentionality with that is very important. So I want to talk a little bit about a specific area of mindfulness that you practice called breath work. And I was really excited to have you on the podcast because it's called From Guilt to Good. And you use breath work for meditation with healing from guilt and burnout. And that's what we talk about all the time. So I was like, I really want you to dive in. I want to just hand over the show to you and let you teach us a little bit about how breath work can help us in healing that guilt, that burnout.
Yeah. Well, I'm imagining that a lot of your listeners, and maybe even you guys, are like me, where you can get to your end of your day after serving so many people and doing so much for others that you just feel kind of drained, like just like, I've been going and going and going and doing for so many, and I feel drained, and my vitality feels a little drained. So what we teach people in what's called Vishoka meditation, which is one of my courses, is how to revitalize themselves through basic breathing techniques. So it's not hard. This is for everyone. This is for people who are like, how do I get started? Well, you just start with your breath. You breathe. Yeah, you just breathe, and you just breathe. We teach people how to breathe also diaphragmatically, because a lot of times we can have our breath up in our chest and hold it, especially during crisis situations. We can hold our breath and not even know that we're holding our breath in, or we can breathe in and hold, or we can breathe out and hold, and do it all day long and not realize that we have just spent the last 7 to 12 hours holding our breath periodically and not taking continuous breaths. And stress and sometimes crisis situations, which I am imagining people who care for other people find themselves in, they
Yes.
can become somewhat unaware that that has now informed how well they're able to care for others, how much
Yeah.
vitality they're able to bring. And what we know is, and I'm sure you probably felt this way, like the more drained you are, the less you can give,
Yeah.
right?
I do want to ask you a question about breath work because I've studied breath work as well. I'm a mindfulness teacher. And one of
Mm.
the things that I learned about breath, and I want to know if you've heard this as well, is that breathing is one of the things that we can do both voluntarily and involuntarily. So we don't have to tell ourselves to breathe, we just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can also tell ourselves breathe in for 10 counts, breathe out for, we can um, manipulate our breath. So we can
Mm-hmm.
do both of these things. And I've heard, and I feel like it's true for me, that when you are doing intentional breath work, so when you're paying attention, when you're doing the 4 count breath, the box breath, all those different breathing techniques, and you're paying attention and you're elongating and you're using the diaphragm, then in times where you're not practicing that intentional, your body will use that breath that you taught it. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense? So
Absolutely.
like you're training your breath to breathe deeply, fully when in those training sessions essentially. And then when you're in a crisis, it's like, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that breathing.
Yes,
Have you found that in your practice?
absolutely. And conscious breathing and practice breathing can actually carry you through. So if you did, let's say, 10 minutes a day of very intentional breathing that is a practice,
Mm-hmm.
that actually can carry you through 8 to 10 hours of your day. But you have to
Right.
have that specific time in which that's all you're doing is focusing on your
Mm-hmm.
breathing and what your breath is doing. So the 5 qualities of breath aren't really being taught anywhere. And the 5 qualities of breath are so easy. And that's one of the things that we really dive deep into in Vishoka is the 5 qualities of breathing, which are
Yes, I was going to
continu-
say, tell us.
continuous. So that means there's no pause between inhale and exhale. So you're just like, you're breathing, inhaling, and exhaling, and you're not pausing on the inhale, you're not pausing on the exhale. So continuous. Smooth, which means that it doesn't jerk on the way in.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't jerk on the way out. It's not bumpy, it's smooth. So
Okay.
continuous, smooth,
Continuous.
deep. And deep means that it's a full inhalation and it's a full exhalation. So it's not inhale short, exhale long. It's full inhalation and exhalation. So smooth, deep, even, so that the
Mm-hmm.
exhalation and the inhalation are the same in duration,
Okay.
which is like that. This is a kind of a lot to take in, but if you breathe out and you notice that, oh, that's longer than when I can breathe in, you're
Mm-hmm.
just noticing that.
Right.
So that's the 4th quality: smooth, deep, even, and then quiet.
Yes. Quiet breathing. I learned that as one of the, when I first learned about breathing, as a practice, was the quietness of the
Mm,
breath and how
mm-hmm,
practicing that as much as anything else was very helpful. It's an interesting that you mentioned too, because this, of course, like you talk about in breath work, it's like, is this really taught? And one of the things that I noticed, depending on which modality of breath work you use, a lot of times you are breathing out for longer than you're breathing in, or breathing in for longer than you're breathing out, or you are holding and pausing. Like some of the techniques do practice that. Is there any, what would you say to, how is the breath work that you teach in Vishoka different than, let's say, a box breathing technique, or one of those that is, 6 counts in, 10 counts out, or whatever?
I fully believe that all of those breaths, with
It's
intention
breathing.
have,
So,
and they have great, it's just like, where do you want to go? Right? What's
right.
the goal at the end that you want to be able to come into contact with? And
So
Vishoka,
different techniques can give you different benefits. Okay,
absolutely.
gotcha.
You know, like if you were doing breath of fire, which is that really, I'm sure you probably know where you
Yeah.
just like,
You
you
puff
know, in
your
and out
belly
through
in and
the,
out.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like that's going to take you somewhere else than a really deep, calm, even smooth and quiet breath is going to take you. And we're
Right.
talking about helping professionals who help other people. And so
Right.
with Vishoka, the goal is to reach that state of sorrowless joy and vitality that is innate in all of us. So how do you reach it? You reach it through your breath. You reach it through the
Mhm.
techniques. So,
So let's talk about a little bit more about the concept of sorrowless joy. When I first read that in your bio, I was like, well, duh, joy is the opposite of sorrow. But then I'm like, but there's a reason that it's called this. So can you talk a little bit more about the concept of sorrowless joy and what that really means and
mm-hmm.
why it's important to cultivate that, especially for a daughter, a wife, a mom that is also a caregiver.
Because sometimes the world in which we live through the senses in our life we can get attached and become sad or become overwhelmed with so much to do. And the state of sorrowless joy comes from the Yoga Sutra, the first pada. And
Okay.
so, mm-hmm,
And go
sorrowless
ahead and
joy,
explain that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is
Go ahead and explain a
actually,
little bit of that.
it's a state that's innate to all humans, but you have to have a pathway to get there. It's not
Mm.
something that we are going to intellectualize. It's not something that we necessarily talk about. It's a felt sense and it's an experiential sense. We experience it. So that is what we teach in Vishoka is how to get the person who starts on the path with us all the way to that state so that they have that pathway anytime throughout their life. So they can return to it. Just like you were saying earlier in the podcast, like if you do intentional breathing, that it helps you for the rest of the day. When
Mm-hmm.
you learn the path of Vishoka, which it's a whole body of information and it's a whole
Right.
body of experience, you can return to it at any time. It's approachable, it's easy, it's made for the masses, and it is relevant today. It's relevant to
Yeah.
us living here now, even though it's from an ancient text. It's very poignant now because we're human.
One of the things I love about any type of breath work is,
Mm.
like we alluded to at the beginning, is like it's your breath. It is
Mm-hmm.
something that you always have with you. So caregivers are constantly trying to find solutions, easy ways to de-stress, to, you know, get centered, get focused, calm down, whatever, whatever, calm down. And so not always having access to, the some of the tools that we think about, like, well, nice walk on the beach would be great, glass of wine would be great, or whatever. It's like, well, I can't just always do that. I don't always have an hour to go walk on the beach. It's like, what do we have accessible to us? And I love how accessible the breath is, but it is so interesting, like you mentioned, that we have this tool with us all the time and we do not know how to use it. We are sipping. I used to teach Pilates back in the day, and I used to always tell people that, to stop sipping the air, like,
Mm.
it's like, it's not helping you if you're not getting it all the way down where it needs to go. And so that idea of really having that deep breath, the even breath, the continuous breath, the smooth breath, the quiet breath. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever, so when you uh, work with people in your program, and somebody, you're teaching them the art or the practice of Vishoka, how would you say it?
It's both an art and a practice. It is. It is because it's
Okay.
individualized for your own
Yeah.
experience.
So there's this period of time where they get this guided practice of learning how to breathe in this experience. I don't even want to say like this way of breathing, because it's more like an experience than like a specific do this, do this, do this. What do you like? How would you?
It's
I don't want
both.
you to give away everything. But I don't want you to spill all your secrets, but I kind of want you to spill some of your secrets, Sondra.
Well, so okay, so specifically, like Vishoka is a 12 sessions practice that
Okay.
we go through.
Okay.
It's taught live only. They can digest it later too if they have
Right.
access to the class.
Mm-hmm.
Vishoka, this particular methodology can never be taught and then sold. It like has to be taught live only, meaning
Right.
from person to person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 12 sessions.
So like it's 12 sessions, but does that mean there's 12 parts of this breathing method that I have to learn?
No, there's
Okay.
really, so I just gave you one, which is the 5 qualities.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
Okay, that's one that's in there. And then there are a few other techniques that all go together to a final
Okay.
experience called um, and then there's a relaxation in there that you can do on your
Right.
own too.
Right. Gotcha.
Because when we can relax our central nervous system and our body, we know that we are more open to healing both mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And breathing does for us that which nothing else can do. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it leads us into our most inner self.
Can you talk to me a little bit more about the idea of meditation and healing from guilt or burnout or both? Like, how does that help?
Mm.
So many ways. I
Well,
know. I gave her a
right.
loaded question, y'all.
You did. So like guilt is an emotional state usually that has a lot of different other states with it.
Mm-hmm.
And if a
It's not
person,
just one thing. Mm-hmm.
no, it's not. Guilt is never just one thing. It has other tendrils that it's attached to.
Mm-hmm. So I would imagine that practicing mindfulness, breath work, meditation allows you to be open to that healing that you just talked about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
when you are able to breathe and in this experience with this openness,
Mm-hmm.
then you are more ready to heal.
Then you're more ready to
Whereas,
heal. Yeah. And
yeah,
guilt,
yeah,
I think guilt can be a pattern that we engage in over time that we may believe it actually is getting us what we want, because guilt
mm-hmm,
sometimes is like, if I don't feel bad, then, and if I feel good and this person feels bad, then I'm bad, can be
right,
one of the preset positions in there. But that, what breathing and mindfulness can do is kind of uncouple those identities around that are not helpful for us, that we kind of keep holding, and we
yes,
don't know we're holding them. We don't even know we're like a fish in the water. I didn't realize that I am
right,
burnout, and guilt is a way that I use this in my mind to keep myself kind of in this burnout state. We don't realize
right.
that.
Right. Well, and I think too, like you said, well, first of all, you're right. We don't ever realize we're in burnout until it's like we're smoldering. It's like the flame is gone, that it's just ash, and that's one of the things when I work with caregivers, I'm like, listen, I'm not going to talk to you about avoiding burnout, because chances are, unless you're like on day one caregiving, you're probably burnout. So let's talk about healing from it, moving past it, and then setting up our steps to prevent the next
Mm-hmm.
burnout, right? But I think also there is this idea of like you said, that guilt sometimes is our motivator. So like that's how we know what to do, because if I need to do this, because if I don't, I'm going to be a bad mom. If I need to do this, because if I don't, the doctor's going to think I'm not a good caregiver, or my mom's not going to think I'm a good
Mm.
caregiver. And like we live our day like that, instead of being able to um, accept our responsibilities and roles for, what they are versus what we think they should be. And so I just love that idea of crafting, using breath work, using meditation, allowing your breath to help you find that space inside to
Mm-hmm.
figure out, like you said, that guilt. Yeah, it's there. We know the guilt is there, but what's it attached to? What's going
Mm-hmm.
on? And until we
Mm-hmm.
really check in, we don't know. And so
We
I
don't
love
know.
that I love that you talk about that. And you also, I want to give you an opportunity too, because you've talked a little bit about Vishoka,
The practice.
is it a course?
It's a course. It is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the Vishoka, like you have a course on Vishoka. So Vishoka is a practice and you have a course on it. Is
Correct.
that right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I just want to make sure this for everybody listening. So, and I will put all of Sondra's information in the show notes. For if you want to learn more about Vishoka, you can check that out. But I also want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about your book, which the name of it just already makes me feel better. So I'm going to read it. I'm going to read the name of your book. It's called The Four Attitudes: The Alchemy of an Open Heart and Calm Mind. And so that we've been talking about this open heart, openness for healing. But I want you to talk a little bit more about your book, maybe a little bit of like what prompted you to write it, and then anything else you want to share about that as well.
Sure. So the four attitudes are actually the four noble yogic attitudes, which are friendliness, compassion, non-judgment, and joy, which we talk a little bit about the state of sorrowless joy. I wrote that book because I really want to get it into other people's minds and hearts, these ideas, and that they're so approachable for people who live in households that maybe they're not yogis, maybe they don't practice, but just practicing friendliness towards oneself and being friends with your own mind. And what does that actually mean? And compassion for the parts of you that are in pain, or non-judgment towards the things that you are attached to that may not be helpful for you, but yet they serve you in some way. And joy as a way of being that you already have available to you. So I just wrote it from my perspective of living through life. Like I myself am a breast cancer survivor, and living through that and that was what taught me compassion, self-compassion. And, I've had mentors throughout the years who have taught me a lot about how the mind works and how to work with the mind and have it become your friend. Yeah. And
you talk about mindset a little bit as well. And it sounds like probably it's something that helped you get through your cancer diagnosis and treatment. I know a lot of people that listen to the podcast. I know in my family, we've had a lot of breast cancer and going through all of that, and how even the doctors say that your mindset matters so much. And you talk about that. And I love that you mentioned self-compassion as part of your journey in all of this. And of course, like you said, it's part of the yoga attitudes, but self-compassion and non-judgment are one and the same. Like they're components of each other. And I think that as caregivers, we often struggle with that guilt, which of course is really just a bunch of judgment on ourselves.
Yes.
And so cultivating self-compassion, I know in my program, which is the Empowered Self-Caregiver, we spend a whole section on self-compassion because it's so foreign to those of us who have been stuck in that guilt and burnout cycle for so long, we forget it. And I just love how all of the stuff that we've talked about today kind of brings us back to, we have the tools that we need to help us heal. We just have to learn how to access them. And for you and me and many, thousands of people, millions of people, breath work has been very key to that. And so I love that you've shared a little bit about your journey. And I want you to be able to also tell us how we can get the book if we want to read it. And then any other thing that you want to share with our audience, I'd love for you to have the opportunity to do that now.
Sure. You can go to thefouratitudes.com, and it's spelled out THEFOUR attitudes.com. And my book is there. It's right there. You can also get a free audio download of it. So if reading isn't your vibe, you can listen to it.
I love an audiobook.
You can listen to it on your way to work. And And so that's there for people. And I also have a free newsletter called Divine Times, and that's bite-sized chunks for people to practice. And it's inspirational stories, it's community-based, and that's free, and they can sign up for that anytime.
I love the bite size because as caregivers, we're always trying to squeeze in. A lot of my resources are like 5 minutes.
Yes.
So 5 minutes because that's all we have sometimes. So if you are interested in learning more about Sondra's work, either with Vishoka or getting her book, The Four Attitudes, or signing up for the Divine Times newsletter, which I'm getting ready to do right now, you can head to the show notes. I'll have thefouраttitudes.com and all of her other social media, etc., linked in the show notes. And speaking of bite-sized chunks, you can also get access to my 3-part guided meditation series called Hit Pause and Press On. You can download that breathwork and pause straight to your pocket so that you have it on the go wherever you need to go. And then also get that newsletter, get that Divine Times newsletter so you have that in your pocket too. All right. Thank you so much, Sondra. I appreciate your time. And I'm going to have you on again because we need to learn more about our favorite tool, our best tool that we have, our breath. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you for joining me today on From Guilt to Good. We are a proud member of the Whole Care Podcast Network. To access additional self-care resources that help you feel good, not guilty, and connect with Sondra, check out the show notes or head to theselfcaregiver.com. Subscribe now and joining me in going from guilt to good as you rediscover your worth, reclaim your health, and get back the life you've been too busy to enjoy. And if you've enjoyed this show, please take a moment to leave us a review. Your feedback matters. We're redefining self-care for caregivers one episode at a time. And until next time, remember, you are worthy of the same care you give others.